Now, I don't put a lot of credit in these polls. You're talking about a handful,
Sure.
a few thousand people that are polled. But right now, one of the news stories, and they're covering everywhere right now, is that Trump is leading Biden in 6 of the 7 swing states. Now, it is close. And I think no one is going to take back that this election at the end of the day will be close.
Yep. So if the race was just between Biden and Trump, there was no third party, which we think there will be RFK, but that still remains to be seen if he'll qualify in all those states. Trump is up 5 points in Arizona. That's a little bit above the margin of error. In Georgia, it's very close, just +1 Trump, which we know Georgia is going to be a super battleground as of now, though I think depending on the economy and how Biden kind of proceeds with his campaign, that could also change significantly. He benefited a lot in Georgia on COVID and the ballots, the drop-off ballots, all those kind of things. In Michigan, this is an interesting one. It's still within the margin of error, but it shows Trump up 3. And again, these are the kind of states that Donald Trump won that changed the electoral map in 2016. These were almost impossible states for presidential Republican candidates to win. They would try hard. They would work hard. They'd sometimes get close, but usually by the end.
Very union-driven.
But he's done well amongst
liberal,
them.
more traditional liberal states, because he's not coastal liberals.
But he's done better with the populism message, even with union voters. You go to North Carolina again. Trump now up 6 points. That's outside the margin of error. Nevada up 4. That's outside of a margin of error usually, or right on the edge.
Yep.
And then you look at, Pennsylvania, which again, if you pull off Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio, and those are earlier in the night states, I mean, you're on a pretty good track to being elected. And he right now with a 4-point lead. Again in Pennsylvania, and that's a 3-point lead in Pennsylvania. In Wisconsin, you've got a dead tie at 46%. Wisconsin, of course, we know, it's a difficult state. It's got even more liberal. But what I think is important here for Logan is like what you said, with all that he's faced, with all the negative attention, that people are realizing this is a complete 100% lawfare attack on President Trump, pulling out all the stops to try and hurt him in court, financially, legally, and almost kind of throw him off his game. And instead, voters are responding saying, this is disgusting that you're doing this to a leading presidential candidate, one who I may not even have loved, but now I'm thinking, you know what? You guys hate him so much. There must be a reason why, and I want to know why, and I think it's because he's willing to actually take you and that D.C. establishment on like he did the first time and pay the consequences like he's doing right now.
And that may be one of the moves. We're going to talk about the RFK run later in the show, because that may be one of the things where people get so turned off by the Biden administration that they may not be on board to vote for President Trump, but they aren't going to vote for Joe Biden. And where could their allegiance go? Someone who at least they feel is not the Biden administration. So that'll be interesting. I'm going to be curious. Phone lines are jammed right now. We have a couple open. But when we do get to that segment later in the show, what your thoughts are on the RFK run as it stands right now. He had a lot of heat, kind of cooled, and then all of a sudden, people are talking. And these poll numbers are actually showing a pretty interesting fact, which is he is pulling an equal number or close to an equal number from both President Trump supporters or Republicans and Democrats. Yeah, depending on the state, obviously. But he's kind of said that when they've asked him in questions, they've said, hey, do you think you're going to poll more Democrats or Republicans? He's like, I think I'm going to poll somewhere like kind of equally. And the numbers right now are showing that. So that's going to be very interesting as we head towards November. The last time we had a true spoiler like this would be, or someone you consider to be a spoiler, which he may not be if he's polling equally.
Right.
But you have, obviously, our mind goes to a Nader or your mind goes to Perot. Right. That's really the only 2 times that's happened. Perot had some real consequences.
Yeah.
Nader, maybe not quite as much.
Right.
North Carolina, another place that's interesting because I think you probably get a completely different vibe based on where you are geographically within that state.
Right.
There are probably pockets kind of like a Florida or even, heck, most places have major cities, but I think North Carolina is even separated even more than that, which is districtly almost you have probably what would be far right areas and very left areas, and then probably there's somewhere in between. So it's probably hard to be on the ground in North Carolina and really be able to feel what's happening. If you're in Tennessee, sure, you may be able to say a Nashville, a Memphis. Those are going to go, the actual cities are going to probably go for a Joe Biden presidency. But we all kind of know everywhere else in that area is going to go Republican or go conservative. North Carolina, it's kind of like spots throughout.
Yeah, it is. It is spots throughout. And it's not just all based off big cities and rural, because you've got some rural that's kind of like mountain town, leftist, kind of hippie-ish. Right. And so you've got that going for you, as well as kind of conservative business people in some of the bigger cities, like a Charlotte, where you get a lot of banking and things like that.
And then big education in a lot of these places. You have
when you go to those
universities, the Raleigh-Durham, Winston-Salem's.
Right. I mean, again, it's one of those states that it was not really a swing state, but the Democrats have turned it into one based off demographics, and so it's one we have to take extremely seriously. It's like Georgia, which was not considered a swing state. Georgia used to be a state where all you needed to do was win the Republican primary, and you were going to win statewide.
Yeah, even if the governor or even if or a senator was not necessarily always guaranteed to be Republican, it seemed to be that the presidential candidate was typically.
Yeah, and right now, if you're the Republican, if you were a gubernatorial nominee or Senate nominee, you're almost guaranteed to win there.
Yeah,
like we saw that with Stacey Abrams, just totally fell apart.
Couldn't do it.
So it's something with the presidential race that it also changes the turnout. Especially amongst minority voters. There's a lot more push to go into neighborhoods where people don't vote as often and make sure that they vote either early or through other processes that Republicans have got to make sure that we do.
The current kind of move happening from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you've heard him as sort of the independent, originally was running as a Democrat, gets President Biden, got a lot of traction, that kind of went away, and now running as an independent. You probably have been getting a lot of marketing from him. I know I have, over the last few days, last few weeks. And I found it very interesting that you even had people like Franklin Graham, who obviously has been a pretty big supporter of President Trump.
I would still say it.
Still say yes.
Yeah.
But making statements, because I do believe that team, whoever's running his social media team, whoever's booking him as a guest on a lot of these talk shows, is making a concerted effort to talk to Christian conservatives. He said, I haven't met Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but I wouldn't agree with all of his politics, and I'm sure he wouldn't agree with mine either, but he doesn't beat around the bush, and he comes across as honest. I appreciate that. Honesty is important. It's a biblical character trait, and it's something that's missing in much of politics today. And then he said last night on CNN, he warned America that President Biden is a serious threat to democracy because he's weaponizing the federal agencies. He said President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history, that has used federal agencies to censor political speech or censor his opponent. And I believe he's 100% correct. So that is a big, pretty blanket statement coming from one of the biggest leaders in Christian conservatism. Franklin Graham, son of Billy Graham, runs all of those enterprises. That is pretty interesting to see. You also saw over Easter him make many videos and comments about his relationship with God, what it looks like, what it means to him. And I think what is interesting also, he doesn't come at it and just say, yeah, I'm a Christian. He comes at it with sort of a bigger picture approach, but one that felt honest. We see the polls really generate the fact that he is drawing from both Joe Biden supporters and from President Trump supporters, or really what you'd say probably Democrats and Republicans who feel like they don't want to vote for either of those candidates. That is a pretty interesting moment in this, and we can see, Jordan, that's sometimes leading to what you would consider a spoiler, but right now, the percentage he's polling and what it looks like is that he's really polling from both sides.
It's interesting. So when you look at him, you say it's not really a traditional spoiler. So, I mean, Franklin Graham can kind of put out that tweet about, listen, I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but I do like the fact that he's not afraid of speaking his mind, like when he said that President Biden's a serious threat to democracy because he's, quote, weaponizing federal agencies, and the first candidate in history that has used federal agencies to censor political speech or censor his opponent. And Franklin Graham says, I believe on that point he's right. But then when you do look at the polls, Logan, you realize, when he's not like, it's like he's significantly hurting either Biden or Trump, because when he takes away, it's pretty equal. Now, if we get into a very close race and in one state he takes away a little bit more than another, that could still be a spoiler. Yeah, so we're still at a point where he could be a spoiler, but when we're looking at it kind of from 10,000 feet right now, it's not like he's clearly hurting one candidate over the other.
Yeah, and I think
which is why you don't see either candidate really acknowledging it.
Yeah, I think President Trump has said, I think he's a kind of a good guy. I think there's a comment saying, I think I like him. I like what he has to say. And Joe Biden has I think he has just ignored his campaign. Now, we know that there is going to be a huge fight to get him on all 50 states and whether the Democrats try to fight that as well. But you have his positions, ones you wouldn't agree with, like his position on life. His position on life is, and he put this out, by the way, this is not digging up stuff. All of it, which again, you can give him a little credit. Go to his Instagram page, you'll see it. He put a video saying, well, how do you feel about life? He said, and I kind of quote, he said, I believe every abortion is a tragedy. However, I really don't believe there should be any laws restricting it because I believe in full bodily autonomy. So that was an interesting statement. Again, playing a bit both sides here. We did see a campaign promise that on day one, he would pardon Edward Snowden. What is interesting about that, and we've said this, is you can make a lot of campaign promises when you really have very, very little chance of winning. And he has to know, even if he's saying, I know I can win, he ought to say that. And look, who knows? But the odds are very unlikely.
Well, let's go through the top 7 battlegrounds again. We did it without RFK. And we showed you that Trump was ahead in all but one. If you put RFK in the mix with Biden and Trump, in Arizona, it stays exactly the same, +5 Trump, 39-34 Biden. It is, again, the numbers go down a little bit, but it's still +5 Trump. In Georgia, it's +3 Trump. That actually goes up a couple for Donald Trump. In Michigan, it goes to +2 Trump. That's one less than if RFK wasn't in it. So it goes from a +2 instead of +3. So, I mean, you were talking about, a +1. These are all within margin of error. If you go to North Carolina, interestingly enough, where you've got Biden at 43 and 49 Trump, if you throw in RFK, it's again, it goes up to +8 Trump. So in North Carolina, so he actually does. RFK is hurting Biden more there. But then you go to Nevada, about the same, +4 Trump. It's with RFK in it, +3 Trump, +4 Trump without him in it. You go to Pennsylvania, +3 Trump with him in it, +3 Trump without him in it. And Wisconsin, instead of it being tied at 46, it gives Biden a 3-point lead. So that would be, again, the only state that RFK is hurting Trump in
the swing states.
The swing states would be Wisconsin, and that +3, it was in a state that was tied, and the other poll is still within a margin of error. So right now it's really unclear that he's hurting either side. It might be more state, like I said, Logan, state to state it could have an influence, and that's why you got to even go to the micro level. The macro level may not tell us the story here.